Hey everybody, welcome to the Patty G Show. I'm your host, Patty G. We are here for a community-filled, community-focused episode with Nial Patel from Cornerstone. We're talking about getting involved in the community, being active, and asking the question, why? So, are you subscribed to the show? If not, why not? Join us each and every week. Subscribe, like, and follow. Get us out there, help people promote the show. And hope you enjoy this episode brought to you by Lake Men's Health Center and PB&J Productions. Kick us off, man. Take us back to the first time you thought you would be doing what you were doing today. Where was it? And
yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You know, I kind of stumbled upon all of this, and I'm really happy I did. In 2003, I always kind of knew I liked politics. I was kind of a math guy. I don't know if you know, but I also went to Louisiana School in Natchitoches, so math, science, and arts is that school in LSMSA. And that was sort of like, it was easy. It was just, and so I thought that was sort of the route. Go work on Wall Street. You know, that was kind of a big thing. And then I also liked the West Wing, and it was just like politics. It was just always fascinated me. And so in 2003, Bobby Jindal was running for governor. And, I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I always heard of him, knew of him. I wasn't close to that family. And so, I we kind of knew Supriya, his wife's, that family from Metairie. And, you know, his parents told my parents, hey, Nial should go volunteer. Randomly met some folks out one night, and they said they worked on the campaign. I was fascinated. And so like a week later, I went to the office, and it was like it was like 6 people in the office. And I was like, this is a governor's campaign? Wow, okay. It was in a small house in Spanish Town.
well, they were in a house.
Yeah.
They were even in like a formal, well, they turned the house into a formal office.
Yeah, it was each bedroom had their own office and stuff, and some people had dual offices. And there was a guy named Drew Smith and Luke Letlow, and they shared an office. And I kind of gravitated towards them because they were sort of my age. And I just kind of liked it. I was like, okay, well, what can I do to help? And they were like, well, cut these maps. And they're going to give these maps out to volunteers, and they're going to go walk neighborhood by neighborhood, or street by street, and start taking, canvassing neighborhoods across the state. So I just sat there and cut maps. And I was like, this is weird. I thought I'd do policy and debate prep or doing all kinds of sexy, cool things. And then a week or two later, I'm trying to remember, I think it was John Henkel, who was the Senate president at the time, and said he wasn't going to run for governor. And it was like a busy time in the office. Everybody's taking phone calls, trying to, pontificate what this means, make moves, secure votes or endorsements. And I still remember me and Luke, we were like, man, that was kind of a high today. And I was like, I want to come back. I'm going to come back every day. And so I just came back every afternoon. I would come back and just stay there till late at night. And that's how I kind of got involved. And it just started translating more and more. The more I was there, the more they trusted me. The more they trusted me, the more work I did. The busier I got. And it just kind of, over the evolution of it, was like, my culmination in that little family was my office was next to the governor's office. And, that was kind of a cool thing. I was thinking back, I was 27, 28 years old when I left. I was like, man, it was in my 20s. That's what I did in my life. So, yeah.
And so at what point did you start getting paid?
Yeah.
It sounded like a lot of volunteer work at first.
And so, I still remember I was working when Bobby won the congressional race. I actually got my first paycheck when he was in Congress. And not that I didn't get paid before, but my first official, not a campaign account. And I was making $17,500. And I was, 25, 26 years old. And I was kind of devastated at the same time. I was also like, wow, this is my first check. It's not waiting tables at Al-Basha like I did at college or the campaign. And so that was my first thing. Fast forward, it's all a public record. I made $60,000, $70,000 when I was in the governor's office. So not a lot, but I was there 14 hours a day. And so I decided to take time off. And I was looking at people my age that I grew up with. They were doing real estate and they were making a ton of money. And so I said, I want to go do that. Left the governor's office. I went around the world about 3 months by myself.
Looking for doing what?
Just to relax, just to unwind. I went and most of my family's in London. I went to India. So my dad came and visited me. My sister came with him. We spent about 2 weeks in India. I went all over the place just by myself, just to relax. When's the one time in your life where you have a little bit of money, you're this age, and you can just travel? And so I did that. And when I came back, the development company it's still there. It was just not fast. It wasn't fast paced. It was just, okay, we apply for this bank loan. Let's see what happens in 45 days. And so I got phone calls from different government affairs folks in town, and I decided to join Cornerstone. They made me an offer. It was part-time at first. They were attractive because they had a DC office and a state office. And so I was able to kind of marry both politics. They're different. And again, like I said, it was part-time at first. Like, let's see if this works out. I was not a cabinet member. I wasn't chief of staff. Let's see what you really can do. And I just sat, like I said, in the governor's office, in the congressional office, I sat back and listened a lot, and I worked a lot. And so I think that's what paid off when I went working for Cornerstone part-time. Like, oh, I know that. Oh, I know this person. Oh, I know why this is a certain way. And we just started building clients. And they were like, wow, okay, do you want to be here full-time? And I was, yes. And so then it just started, do you want to be in management? Do you want to be on the board of directors? And it's sort of translated into that. And I've been blessed. I mean, it's a great firm. I'm honored that, I get to make a good living out of it. And at the same time, knock on some wood, I have some really cool clients. I mean, who can say no to Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center, right?
Right.
You're fighting cancer, and you go advocate for that sort of nonprofit in our community. It's a blessing, and it's an honor, and it takes some time and effort and work. But yeah, that's when it was 2011. Bobby had gotten reelected, and that's when I started peeling away and did that trip part-time, and then I've been at Cornerstone since.
So in a decade in politics, what was it like being in the office with Bobby Jindal and the whole thing that was happening? I
wish sometimes I could go back and relive those moments. I feel like they were the glory days of my life. I also realized that we were so young, all of us. I mean, Bobby was 40 or something. Our chief of staff was young. Everyone, all of us were just about, me and Luke were in our 20s. It was an awesome, amazing experience. Sometimes I still think, I'm like, wow, I don't realize what kind of value that office held at that time when I was there. And so, I mean, yeah, I was always also a guy that wanted to please everybody. And I was intimidated. Bobby was a young, smart guy, right? He's Indian. I'm Indian, obviously. And so, growing up, it's like, hey, look at what this son did, or look at what that kid did. And you always compare it to other families. And he was the epitome of that in Louisiana. So I always had this reverence of like, wow. So I'll say day to day, I was always nervous. I'm like, okay, my chief of staff, Timmy Teeple, or the cabinet, or the governor. I'm like, wow, okay. These people, how do I always make sure they're happy with me and I'm doing? And a lot of times I realized, I thought I was not meeting their expectation. Come to realize, like, hey, look, you were doing great, and you kicked ass. But I was always nervous. And so we had this little group. We would stay there till 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, especially during all those disasters we had, right? We had Gustav, Ike, the BP oil spill. We had all kinds of stuff. And there was it was like a family. And so we would stay in that office late at night, order food. We talk about personal stuff, like boyfriends, who's dating who, kids. And we played jokes. My thing, I'm very sarcastic, and sometimes a dry humor.
Right.
And me, Garrett Graves, mostly the two of us. So at some point, Luke would come in and play some jokes with the staff, just to kind of keep the tensions light. So no, it was an awesome experience. I was always nervous, Patrick, always nervous that I was disappointing somebody.
So, but like, what were you doing in your head that made you think you were disappointing them? I mean, like, were you just coming up short? Were you not fulfilling what you had promised? Like, or was it just kind of built up as you progressed through your career of like, you better not let that happen?
Yeah, I think that. And growing up, my parents they weren't they were strict, right? I didn't have a chance to go in and play ball with my friends in the neighborhood. Look, I grew up in a motel in New Orleans East. And so we had the parking lot. It was 20 rooms. Me and my sister grew up there. My brother was there for a little while before we moved into an apartment. We were studying either at school, studying at home, or that's it. I mean, visiting family and friends, and that's about it. We didn't have sleepovers. We didn't have that. So it was kind of always like this intense mentality of like, go and be the best you can. And I at some point I didn't know what that was. And so I don't think it was me. I don't think I was not doing what I needed to do. I think it was just entrenched in my bones. It was like, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. And I think that also, I know now that years later, I know that everybody saw that and they would poke at me every now and then. Look, I'll tell you this story. It was like, the staff, they would go, I was handling his schedule. Mm-hmm. And so, you would have back to back. He had this little clock in the office. These are how many months we have left in the office, how many years we had left. We can't waste any time.
Countdown clock.
Yeah, we always knew that we only had so many days in this office, right? And you want to go do big transformational stuff. So every minute, every hour counts. And, if you were doing an event from Lafayette to here, you would state troopers with escorts and all that stuff. You would calculate an hour? At some point, it would maybe take an hour and 5. Well, I would just back to back. Okay, well, it's an hour today. It's rush hour. It'd take an hour and 10 minutes maybe. Mm-hmm. Well, then sometimes you'd get there in an hour. And I'd get a note back from the staff. Hey, you calculated the drive time wrong. We have 10 minutes here. We have nothing to do. And they would just beat me up. and they were in the car laughing. Like,
right.
Yeah, let's mess with Neal.
Yeah.
And so it's just started building up. I'm like, okay, I can't mess up next time. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now I know every time he leaves at 2:00, it's going to take an hour and 5, not an hour and 10, right? At 3:00, it may take an hour and 10. So it was just these small things, but the whole staff knew it. And so they would always push these buttons and I would just always get nervous if I was disappointing somebody.
So running a schedule for somebody, walk us through how that even begins to come together. The governor let alone. Yeah,
I think it's the way I think it should be done. The way we did it in our office is his priorities, right? Mm-hmm. He got elected. He has a constituency. What are we going to get out there? And so you kind of prioritize. This is what he wants to do and how he wants to spend the next couple of weeks. We never tried to plan any more than 2 or 3 weeks in advance because everything could change, right? And then we'd find out who our stakeholders are and what they needed and what time that would, allocate to the schedule. And then we'd have all these constituencies. So I'd say stakeholders, like I'm talking about legislators, cabinet members, things that we need to go in, mayors that would check in the box to move our agenda forward. And then you'd had all these constituencies of, I'm a XYZ president of this association, and I need 5 minutes of his time. Well, it's never 5 minutes, right? It's always 30 minutes. And so I think you just start that way and you sit and you collect it all. And I had the pleasure of, like you said, a governor. And so I was able to dictate that and say, okay, we're not going to do this on this day. We're going to do it on this day. They made themselves available. And, you start thinking of yourself. I do this now on my own personal calendar. Like, hey, what's the day look like? Let's make it as easy as possible. I just look at my calendar. That's when I wake up. I look at my calendar. Okay, it's kind of a light day. These are my meetings. So I don't need a suit and tie. I need a sports coat, right. Or I can wear jeans today. And then you just start that's your to-do list. One meeting after the next. I got time blocked in for reading. I got time blocked in to catching up on emails. And that's kind of how we built it. There was no rocket science. I think it was just always another big thing was always being very organized. So we were responsive to folks. I still remember today when I left, one of the first phone calls I got was from a lady by the name of Donna Sternberg. Deborah Sternberg, sorry. She had called me up and she said, look, you had never said yes to anything I asked for while you were in the office. 90% of the time was a no, but you always said it with a smile and you always responsive. And she was like, that's going to go a long way. So I think you being organized, being responsive, and then being disciplined to kind of keep that going, right? You don't want to have too many late nights. You don't want to have too many early mornings, kind of figuring that out. So again, it's just, how do you think a person would operate, kind of managing that schedule?
Yeah. No, I love you always say no with a smile. I feel like that's often the hardest thing to do, but you had to learn how to do it real quick, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about I moved up pretty quick from a caseworker, from a volunteer to a field guy to helping on the campaign to do it. I mean, yeah. And so by the time I started talking to external folks, it was just, hey, look, I get it. I feel your pain. I understand it's a big issue for you. And there's only so many hours in a day. And so we'll get to you. And look, you always find a way to say yes to something, right? Mm-hmm. And luckily I had a whole staff, or Bobby had a whole staff. Hey, I can't meet with you, but here's Stephen Wagensback or Garrett Graves or, Jimmy Faircloth is going to go talk to you. We had so many rock stars, Camille Conaway, Jody Montalero, Christy Nichols. I mean, you think about the folks that we had on our policy team, all of them are running huge operations in the state of Louisiana, and they're still moving the ball forward. I mean, Aaron Bendeley's with the Pelican Institute. I mean, and so I had the luxury of like, hey, look, Bobby himself cannot meet, but these are some rock stars. They're going to treat you just as, you deserve. And we'll have an answer for you, yes or no. And they're the ones who are going to help Bobby make that recommendation. So yeah, it was really good.
Yeah. They're gonna be the ones responding to the emails and making it happen. He's got all of his other meetings to do.
Yep.
So you go from there and you decide to get involved in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
What? I mean, I get you went and had your travel and all that stuff. And afterwards you were like, I'm just going to go start helping folks in the nonprofit industry.
Yeah. It started, I would say around 2014 or 15. I think the first thing was the best dress thing in Baton Rouge. And they were like, hey, look, would you do that? I'm like, oh yeah. Okay, cool. It was kind of a fun little thing. I got asked to do something. I danced with the star, Big Buddy. Mm-hmm. And I just, and it was just opened my eyes. I'm like, you know what? I sit back and I'm like, I do have the means to do stuff now. And so how do I get involved? From work, you saw LABI, the state chamber and Baton Rouge area chamber. And, you see how they would influence decisions at the Capitol. So I joined those two organizations just to see, okay, maybe that gives me some intel to kind of help my clients so I understand the landscape at the Capitol, or what's happening that day, the temperature of the legislature. So I did those two things. I had all these other folks ask me to kind of help, right? Wow, you seem to know a lot of people. Could you help us raise money for this? And sometimes I said yes, and sometimes I said no. So between that, lobby, and BRAC, I also started doing these leadership classes. The Council for a Better Louisiana Cable.
Okay.
They're now called A Better Louisiana. They have something called Louisiana Leadership. I did that class when, we had classmates from around the state. I did the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. They have a leadership class. I did both of them at the same time. And so it was
like at the same week?
It was the same year.
Okay, same year. Okay.
And so I put them all on my calendar. I was like, oh, wow. Okay, so there's 52 weeks, and I've already booked up about, half of them. At the same time, I was also doing a lot of Republican Governors Association stuff. So I was traveling outside the country, outside the state, doing that. I was like, okay, well, I guess 2016 is that year where I kind of did all of that. I was like, let me just give back. I had a couple clients. They were not that hard or difficult to manage. And so I was able to kind of do the leadership classes, do that RGA stuff, the BRAC and the lobby thing. And I took a step back in 2017. I was like, okay, I did all of this stuff. Now, what do I do after it? And I've got money now. I've got the means to kind of go and help. And I have the knowledge of like being in some conversations or being in rooms that other people aren't privy to. And so I just felt passionate. I was like, look, education is the biggest thing I think can move the needle on so many fronts, right? If you had a better educated community or state, you'd have better job opportunities. You'd have less crime. You'd have more taxes for fixing infrastructure, all of that stuff. So I kind of just dived in. When I went to Teach for America, I was like, oh, I'd like to be on your board. I'd like to help out. And they're like, wow, yeah. New schools for Baton Rouge, another one. Let's go get some of the best schools around the country and recruit them to be in Baton Rouge. So so these kids have an opportunity for an excellent education. So it's sort of one thing after the next. And then next thing you know, I mean, I'm on these two boards. I've done all those classes and memberships. I'm on those two boards and I just get, knee deep. And then it was politics. It was like, wow, okay, I know all these folks. I've seemed to build a rapport. I think they understand that I'm not coming to them with every 2 weeks, I'm like with a new shiny thing. Mm-hmm. I don't make a dime off of any of that. But I know that all these guys care about it. So that's how I started doing all this nonprofit work. The Safe BR thing, if you will, we can kind of translate in that.
Sure.
You guys, my dad was killed in New Orleans. And so I came back and crime was kind of getting crazy in Baton Rouge, right? You saw a lot of violent crime stats. And so I was put in a room, and there was a lot of business folks, some of the wealthiest guys in the city. Let's go in and talk about getting the police, let's recruit better police officers or more police officers, and let's pay the ones we have more. They were getting paid, I think, a starting salary of $40,000. The mayor at that time had started at, $50,000. And these guys had said, hey, mayor, and she was at the end of the table, I still remember this, and said, what would it take if we all stood behind you and supported a property tax to get them at starting salaries of $60,000? And she says, well, I don't know. And, she was kind of iffy about all of that. And I raised my hand and I said, why are we increasing taxes to go pay officers more? I'm just curious. I'm like, why can't we go take money over here or from there or there? Like, if you were in a business, if one entity or unit needs money, you would take it from something else and go do that. You wouldn't take out another loan, right? And so I kind of started pushing all those questions. And at the end of the meeting, they were like, okay, Neil, you run with it. Go find out all those answers. I don't know all these answers. I just kind of brought all y'all,
I just have the questions.
I just got the questions. Answers. And so who has them? I was like, well, the chamber may, the foundation may. There are a lot of smart people in town. And so, yeah, I mean, that was kind of something. And so I kind of just led that effort. I'm like, guys, if that's what we want, what are we trying to solve? And then after a while, it's like, what are we really trying to solve? It was this idea and conversation about consolidating the sheriff and BRPD. I mean, it's like talking. If you say that in this town, and I don't care about saying it, I'll talk about it all day long. It's like you're talking about taking away someone's house, right? I mean, it's a conversation, and I'll tell you, we were very, very close. There were elected officials that came to us and said, "Look, we think this makes sense. Can you get us a sort of a report?" To see if it's viable and what other cities have done. It was we raised, it was a couple $100,000, Patrick, from these guys that have seen me over a while and trusted me and said, okay, well, we believe that, you're spending the money wisely. And so go hire a national consultant, got the report back. They were like, absolutely. It could save us money, $50 million about, approximately if you do, but it's going to be tough. These are some models that other cities have done and whatnot. And the guys that had asked us to do that, the elected officials, kind of backed away. And so I looked around and was like, okay, well, I thought y'all were here.
You're sitting here with this stack of reports.
Yeah, y'all wanted this. I went and got my friends to pay. And so, it was deflating. But I mean, at the end of the day, I go back to the guys and I'm like, hey, what are we really trying to solve? We're trying to solve for reducing violent crime in Baton Rouge. So this was one idea. Nobody seems to stand behind me now. What's another idea? Mm-hmm. One of the things that is alarming in that report was that we still spend more on public safety than anywhere else in the country.
Really?
Yeah. I think the stat.
What elements of public safety?
So they talk about, we have like 12 different law enforcement agencies in East Baton Rouge Parish. Baker, Zachary, now St. George, Central, East Baton Rouge, BRPD. We had the sheriff's office, LSU PD, Southern, the Baton Rouge Airport has their own police. You have the constable. You got all these different entities, right?
So what does a constable do?
Mm-hmm. I think they are supposed to. I think they're supposed to go in and secure the courthouse and City Hall.
Okay,
it's not a big entity. It's a couple $1 million.
Well, because like I've seen them around town.
Yeah,
and like you know how when you're driving down the road and you see a cop car pulling behind you. Everybody does it.
Yeah,
you kind of
slow down.
You slow down. Yeah. You tense up a little bit.
It's a constable.
And then the constable drives by. I'm like, I don't know what level of jurisdiction they have over me here.
Well, I don't think I do know they don't have traffic, so don't worry about that.
Well, then you have the Department of Public Safety, the other cop cars that control traffic or something.
So that's state.
Okay, that's state.
That's state.
All right.
Yeah, Department of Public Safety. Yeah. And they are usually around the Capitol complex downtown.
Or they're the ones that help with the contraflow after LSU games.
Yeah. What are they?
Is that the same organization?
They're the same. LSU uses a ton. The DPS.
Yeah, DPS. There it is.
BRPD, the sheriffs, they use everybody.
So, but like in DPS, I've seen them downtown now that we are downtown. And I've seen them just parked on the side, and I'm like, are you checking me for speed? Or are you like, what's your role here?
DPS, DPS is safety. I mean, it's not criminal or anything like that. It's safety, right? But we have all these agencies. And I think the national average per person per year is, I think 300. I got to go back and look at the stats, but I want to, it's $100. Mm-hmm. We're spending $200.
Really?
Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah. Right. It's and I can get you this stat, but we do spend a lot. And a lot of it's due to all of these different entities. You got old deferred maintenance. You've got a retirement system that's kind of broken, right? It's a good retirement system, but at some point we're going to run out of money there. UAL at the City Hall is not attractive right now, and it's going to leave us really devastated in 7 to 8, 10 years or so.
That quick?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Councilman Daryl Host had put out a pay study, and that guy came in and was like, look at all the city employees, man. We're all going to be bankrupt in a little bit. We got to go in and pay these guys better. We also got to go and get them a better retirement system. I mean, there's a whole restructuring that needs to happen. But getting back to public safety, we spend a lot. And so I think cops need to get $100,000 a year. Easy. I mean, they and teachers, that's what they keep our civilization moving, right? And so why don't they all make $100,000 a year? Well, you have all these other issues. And so if we're not going to go and consolidate or merge or deconsolidate or whatever the case is, how do we go in and streamline and take out all the fat and then give it to the salaries for these offices? Get them better trained. You have this argument, well, the sheriffs are trained better than the BLPD, or the BLPDs have more hours than the sheriff. You've got these different municipalities that are, contracting with different folks for safety. So, I mean, it really is sort of nobody's answered that question. Like, why not? It's kind of a back and forth. Well, here's a couple of reasons why we should do it. Here's a couple of reasons maybe it doesn't work, but, long story short, we just want to go reduce violent crime.
Right.
And I will give, some credit to the new mayor. Coach Edwards has gotten Jeff LaDuff, who a lot of people respect across the board, to kind of come in and say, hey, look, guys, let's take the temperature down. Forget about politics. Let's go back to relationships, right? Hiller and him and Jeff and the sheriff, they all kind of grew up in the same ranks in public safety 20 years ago or so. They kind of have this mutual admiration and respect. So I see them partnering on things that they weren't talking about before. I see them investing in things that they weren't investing in before. That transparency across all these agencies. Hopefully, I know they're working on them. And so I have a lot of optimism. So if that's the end goal, maybe that's all it needed, is that the right person. And so now let's reduce the violent crime, and then let's go back and talk about the budget and see what other ways we can streamline. They came out with the parades, right? They need to pay for their own police. I'm from New Orleans, and that's what we did. It was part of the cost of having a parade. How do you do that? When do you do that? Do you give everybody a year notice so they can budget accordingly? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you just pull the rug on anybody. But I mean, those are small things, right?
So
It's
New Orleans
$500,000.
pays for
Absolutely.
all the police or the
parades
dues?
do.
The parades
Yeah,
do? Okay.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, but we don't do that in Baton Rouge.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
Well, I guess we're still kind of just getting our feet wet with what a parade is. So,
Hey, man, we've got some really cool ones, right?
do.
St. Patty's Day.
We do.
Spanish Town.
Oh, and they showed up at St. Patty's Day.
On Sunday.
Oh, my gosh.
On a Sunday.
That was insane
Yeah.
how many people and also how much of a law enforcement presence there was.
Yeah. I mean, look, this Jeff LaDuff, I'll give credit to him and Chief Morris and all of them. I mean, Sheriff Gautreaux. I feel really optimistic of where we are in public safety. They're all working together, man. They really are. And so I'm very optimistic. But yeah, they're showing up. One random thing is it's the small things, right? It's like, I remember Jeff was talking about this with me in the transition meetings. When they were cops, they didn't have all these tinted windows. They all knew they could see inside the vehicle and say, oh, that's Jeff, or that's Patrick, or that's Neil. And they'd have this relationship with cops, right? Or sheriff's deputies or whoever, And so he's trying to get rid of that. He's trying to get that relationship back with law enforcement and the community, which is commendable. And I think it's going a long way. We want to be present. We're not here to arrest y'all. We're here to protect y'all, right?
Yeah, at least change that mentality around it, right?
Yeah.
Get it so they see it as another member in the community and not somebody just out to get them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you to our wonderful sponsor, Lake Men's Health Center with Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group. Guys, I know it's tough to get out and go to the doctor. I know it's challenging to find time in our busy days, but I promise you, signing up to be a part of this group with Dr. Curtis Chastain and Dr. Tyler Boudreau, you won't regret it for several reasons, but most of those being the fact of the time it saves, where you're able to get in on the same day, get that appointment done, and spend that time you need to talk with them about what your health goals and concerns are, as well as ensuring that the financial investments you have, you will be able to live out and see those come to fruition. So if you're an investing guy, you know all about and planning for the future and investing in the future. There's no other more important thing to invest in than your health. Make sure you go check them out, Our Lady of the Lake Physicians Group Men's Health Center, and tell them Patty G sent you.
So that being one of the areas of focus, you kind of talked about clients and how you do work for them. Are your clients mostly individuals or for-profit entities trying to find avenues to help in the community, and you're kind of that connector, so to speak, or are you helping the nonprofits raise money through other connections?
So I would say I kind of completely for the most part do divide that.
Okay.
Like right now I'm the chairman of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber.
Okay.
We have a board of directors. We went and hired a CEO. I'm counsel to her. Lori does a fantastic job trying to get more energy into that. So I put a lot of passion, personal pride, like I said, education, public safety. So I find these things that I'm really passionate about. And when I kind of push folks, some of my wealthier friends, it's like, hey, look, you were at the bar the other day complaining about X, Y, and Z. Where are you? Why aren't you doing something about it? Right? I may give dollars or I may give my time. There's something I can give. Don't just sit around the bar at the coffee table and complain. Let's go do something. So that's where I spend a lot of my nonprofit time, is doing that. If it's an elected official, wow, man, Dixon McMakin, I mean, phenomenal guy. He's a freshman. He really is. He's a smart, ambitious guy. He's going to go to places. He's thoughtful. And he cares about this district, more importantly. Great in 68 is always what he says. So let's go help him get elected. Let's go, talk about these candidates. Julia Letlow is a great, congresswoman from North Louisiana, and so I try to go in and find good leaders in that sense. We went through the EBR superintendent search. Lamont Cole is doing a great job there. So I try to go and support folks in that space, in the public sector, mostly in Baton Rouge, because it helps us through the nonprofit sector and all the stuff that I'm working on get what we need to get done accomplished, right? the Chamber, New Schools for Baton Rouge, all of these entities, it's all education driven. If we don't have a great school board, a great superintendent, I mean, there's only so much we can do from the external side, right? And we do a lot, but there's only so much. So that's that's half of my brain, and probably more than half of my brain and my time. And then over here, I'll spend time at Cornerstone. And again, like I said, I'm on the board of directors. So I'll go up to DC on a regular basis, go through those meetings. I like talking to my colleagues of what's going on in DC. We're in about 15 states. Let's talk about what's happening around in different parts of the country. What could that affect in Louisiana? There was a bill we saw yesterday in Texas that may get passed, that we may see some sort of copycat language in legislation in Louisiana. So I love talking about just politics and policy generally, what this means, what this doesn't mean. And the clients that I have at Cornerstone are anyone from Mary Bird Perkins, yes, they happen to be a nonprofit, to Google, who is absolutely a for-profit company, right?
So your client's Google?
I have a Google. Yeah, Google is a client. Yeah, Google is a client of a Cornerstone, and so we're one of, I think they're in several of our states and Louisiana, and anyone in between. We have some really great local Agilify, Sparkhound, some of these local tech companies. We have, I've kind of led Loyola University here. Endeavors is a great nonprofit that's around the country. GDIT is a facility in North Louisiana. They committed to the state we'd have 500 jobs there. They went through 800. Now they're at 1,000. Now they're looking at maybe even 1,500 jobs coming to North Louisiana. Wow. How do we go in and continue to make sure that they stay in North Louisiana? And so that's the sort of goal I have for that client. Google. Well, look, AI is a big thing, right? We see that around the country. How does AI affect state government or city government? How do we help them? How do we use that technology to make us more efficient? And look, they're even at a place in the Google's history. State working with government is sort of a relatively new thing for them. So they even have credits like, hey, look, I know at the Department of Health, here's a couple $100,000 to y'all for y'all to spend on some staff to implement these solutions that we're going to give to y'all, right? To help you go in and create a chat box on their website for folks that have all these questions about Medicaid or Medicare or this, that, and the other. And so it's okay. Well, now you make the user experience so much easier and friendlier. That cuts down on the call center opportunity and people hanging up or being frustrated. Hopefully, you start working on fraud, waste, and abuse, and you start driving those numbers down. We have another client that provides a lot of data to the state. They go pull Experian data or this data or that data and say, hey, look, Patrick's applying for Medicaid, but based off of these 50 different factors, we think you need to look into it a little bit more. Or based off of these 50 factors, he's definitely not eligible, and there's a red dot next to your name. Or it's easy. He's a no-brainer. Green, boom. You could do that in 2 seconds now. Wow. You click on you type the name, you type in some pertinent info, you click on them. And so I love working with these clients, mostly technology clients, but in any case, if they're for-profit or nonprofit, how do we go in and advance the mission? Are we redefining how hospital deliveries and Medicaid companies work and operate? That's outside my bailiwick. I'm an efficient guy, right? I want to figure out how to make government more efficient. So those are the clients that I kind of lead. How do we go in and keep economic development? So I love working with GDIT and some of these others to stay in Louisiana, grow and expand. Loyola is a great, higher ed institution in New Orleans. There's a nonprofit that's helping teachers get their certifications in professional development. Man, he's doing phenomenal work across the state, and he's only able to touch, I think, about 1,000 teachers. And that's his budget. He's like, look, I don't want to grow too much. I'm growing steadily. If I can get some extra state funds, I'd grow to another 1,100 and then 1,200. And so it's a great alternative to some of these other more high profile, expensive entities that do some of the similar work, right? So that's sort of Cornerstone. It's like, hey, look, we have an issue. At Cornerstone, we'll take anybody that has an issue or needs advice or counsel or has a problem with government at any level, they need a lobbyist, right? Sometimes they don't even know they need a lobbyist, and it's sort of an insurance, right? I'm paying every month this retainer. We had a client and they didn't know. They were like, man, at some point all of a sudden this issue came up on tax season. Like, hey, can you help? I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely something we could try to figure out and address. And through some legislation and working with the Department of Revenue, this was a decade ago, we were able to save them like, I don't know, $3 or $4 million it's a small business. And so $3 or $4 million. I mean, that paid for our retainer and everything. I mean, it was a great insurance policy for them to have, right? For us to get engaged. So those are the type of clients. Is like, I particularly like the efficiency model, and how do we partner with the state to provide secure stuff, efficient stuff, more effective services, right? One of the things I've seen is going back to Bobby, we privatized charity hospital systems, right? We were the only state in the country left that had a charity hospital that was run by the state. We still have 2 other hospitals that the state of Louisiana owns and operates.
Still?
Yeah.
Which ones?
Pineville, and I'm gonna forget the other one. Pineville's the one, and it's a mental health facility, and it's absolutely needed. But they work for the state of Louisiana. They don't work for Oshner or Lake or any of these other entities that we come to, Baton Rouge General. They work for the state. And so do you really think the state of Louisiana, they're in the best, they know how to run a hospital? I mean, I'm not saying the people don't, but the state certainly doesn't, right? And so maybe take those people and move them over into one of those places that, and privatize that, if you will. Catch-22. If you privatize it, they're incentivized to kind of keep the ball moving. Are they providing efficient service or best quality care, this, that, and the other? So you've got to do it in a mindful way. But there's always these small things, right? So I'm kind of diving into that. Like, what other ways, or what other things should government really do? Mm-hmm. And how do we make them do it better than, or should they partner with other companies, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like what happened this year with the Louisiana Department of Revenue making all sales taxes online.
Yeah.
No more mailing out the paper forms to fill out.
Yeah.
That 9 times out of 10, the people are throwing it in the trash and they're not filling it out. But then you have that 1/10 of people that use it, send it back. Then you've got to have somebody sit there and transcribe what's on there or read it through like a Scantron. But really you can't, because the handwriting on there is so poor that you can't read it. It's illegible.
Yeah.
And so then converting the online system gets it more efficient. It's automatically, queued, processed, reviewed, and done. And now you've got that whole system of sales tax just made a whole lot more efficient within one simple platform. Yeah. Well, I say simple platform. It's simple input. The back end's a whole lot more complex.
All the back ends.
That's why Google's here, right?
Yeah, that's why Google. I mean, all these tech guys, they can figure out all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a great example, right? I go back and think of COVID and how we weren't working face to face sometimes, or delivering pieces of paper, at an office, or dropping things off. Everything was virtual. You sign things, get things done. I mean, why aren't we doing that? Why in this day and age do we still have to go to City Hall to go pick up a permit or drop off a permit or do this? And we need to verify it's you. I'm like, there's got to be another way to verify it's me, right? And so it's just
your phones have facial recognition. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
There's got to be another way to verify that it's you.
Yeah.
But I think it's figuring out what systems and processes are overly complicated for a simple procedure. Getting a permit, getting an occupancy license.
Yeah.
Something of that nature where you can look at it and say, what's the end goal?
Yeah.
What's the input that we need? Great. That's all we need to do. Let's not overly complicate this and make all these other elements a part of it, because it's how it always has been.
Yeah. Well, during this mayor's transition, someone said this in a room, and the first question is ask them why. And it's fascinating to watch, like, oh, well, it's always the way we did. Why? Oh, I mean, 10 years ago we put it, why? And you just keep asking that question. It's a simple thing, is why. I'm not, if there's a great answer, it's a great answer. I just don't know. Right.
it's like my little 3-year-old. He's always asking me, why, Daddy? Why, Daddy? Why?
Yeah.
And then you finally give him a good enough answer, and he goes, okay, cool.
Okay, yeah.
And he walks off.
Yeah.
But it's how do we get to that answer?
Yeah.
And to your point, if the why has solid foundation and solid reason, great.
Yeah.
Let's keep it, and we'll just, that's just a part of life, whatever it may be. But if you get to the why and nobody in the room is aware of it, then you can, look at, well, why is it that we do this?
Yeah.
Why did my grandmother cut off the handles of her pot? And the answer ends up being, oh, well, her oven was too small.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, well, we've got a bigger oven now. We don't need to solve that same problem.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, it's a simple why, man. And look, I'm not a policy guy. I'm not an expert in any sort of shape or fashion. What I have learned is I love to connect people. I'll sit and have a conversation with, look, you and I. I mean, the more we get to know each other, I'm like fascinated. I'm like, okay, great. I keep you in the back of my head. I'm like, okay. I met this guy, I don't know, I'm going to say a year or so ago. Hadn't talked to him since then. And I randomly sent him a note and copied it to someone else. And I'm like, hey, y'all should meet. And last week I found out they're in business together. They're making money. Good for them, you know? There was a book, Luke had actually given this to me, Tipping Point. Have you read that or heard about that?
I've heard
Malcolm
of it. I haven't had a
Gladwell.
chance to read it.
And it's a real, all of his books are, I thought, fascinating. But in Tipping Point, he says 99%, it's a bunch of stuff, but one of the key things, 99% of the work is done by 2% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
And so that 2% can be broken down into folks that communicate really well. Paul Revere is a guy that he was a communicator, right? Hey, the redcoats are coming, this, that. And so he talks about that. He said, there's a policy type of person. Hey, look, I'm going to come up with this, awesome idea. Albert Einstein is a policy guy, right? He's like, I'm going to figure this out. And then there's the connector, and there's this talk about him sitting on the plane and, having a conversation, and then like, you don't even know, you never connect to this guy, but then he connects you to you. Y'all are best friends for the rest of your life. You don't even know where this guy is. And quite frankly, that's what I am. I love that. I don't need to have everybody, I don't need any of this stuff. I just want to sit back and watch. Like, wow, let me see all of these things. Like, I hear that you really care and passionate about X, Y, and Z, but you're not doing anything. How do I get you out to do something about it? How do I move your feet to get out from under your desk, to come out to the chamber or wear whatever hat I'm wearing that day to get involved, right? And I think the more of those kind of people I connect, more of those kind of conversations I connect, the more trust I think people have had in me, which just kind of doubles down. I was like, okay, I've got more capital. How do I kind of use that capital to move in a positive direction? And again, someone's got to tell me what that direction is. I'm not a policy guy. I don't know if you need to privatize all of City Hall or, outsource one thing or don't do anything or just give them all the pay. I don't know. I'm not I know what questions, again, going back to another point. I have a lot of questions. Don't look at me for answers. And so I love just doing that. I like connecting those. And so Tipping Point was a really good bit. And it kind of like, this was after I left Bobby's office. I read that book and I've come to peace. I'm like, why am I always trying to be that person that's like coming up with something new, or that person that's gonna help communicate? I'm not well articulate. I get where my, pros and cons are here. I have a lot of strengths, and I think the biggest strength is connecting folks. So let's go do it. Let's go be badass about it.
Yeah. And there's power in that. There's power to connect people, because you often have those two folks that are in business now in a very similar situation. I've got this half of this idea and I've got the other half.
Yeah.
You just need somebody to put them together and they get a full baked idea and they run with it.
Yeah.
So I like it. What are some passion projects outside of where I talk about public safety and education? What are some other little smaller passion projects that you have that you're working on?
That I can tell you publicly. I've always, and it's not something I'm working on right now. It's something that I'm trying to figure out in our community. And so I don't have it all baked out, but I think we're so divided in so many different ways. I feel like when a disaster hits this community, boom, we're there. We got each other's back like nobody else. But we're so divided, and I'm going to say that what I think the most obvious thing that a lot of people, North South Baton Rouge, right? And I think in North Baton Rouge, you may have maybe 2 or 3, maybe different sort of groups and leaders, or power struggles or circles, if you will. I think in South Baton Rouge, you would have 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 different groups or circles. I think there's a lot of means in South Baton Rouge. And if all of those means came together and they truly understood what North Baton Rouge needed and why they need it, I think we can have a game changer of a community here. And I think if the guys in North Baton Rouge understood why the guys in South Baton Rouge are the way they are, you could really transform this community. There are a bunch of rich guys down there. They don't know. They keep saying that we're the problem. We're not the problem. And that's sort of sometimes what I hear. Sometimes they're like, hey, we're asking them for help and they just ignore us. I think in South Baton Rouge, you have folks that are, you got this downtown. I just found out about this a little while ago. You got this downtown crowd. You've got, the country club of Louisiana. You've got, maybe Highland Road or Bocage. You've got U Club and some of those, they're all different. If you think about it, they're all different in some aspects. We're not we don't have 50 billionaires in this community or in this state, but we have a lot of people with wealth. If we could figure out how to get all of those people in a room to truly understand what the needs are in our community, we could do some transformational. I'm going to say this again, one of these guys, I get hit up on, hey, this is something that can save X, Y, and Z. This is something that's needed. 2 weeks later, hey, we need to do this. It needs to be a game. 3 weeks later, it's enough. It's like, guys, we got to be a little bit more focused. What do we, let's go back to this public safety. We just want to reduce public violent crime. So if it's mergers, if it's efficiencies, if it's this, if it's just relationships, great. Let's go figure it. And he's doing that, right? He's reducing public violent crime. So on this side, it's like, hey, what do we really need to be a game changer? I sort of think there's some sort of answer out there. Maybe 3 or 4 things. But again, I'm not an expert. Someone's got to sit down and say, okay, let's get all the big institutions in town. Let's get the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. They've been around 50, 60 years, right? Get the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. They've got a lot of business interest. And when I say business interest, it's all a lot of it, like Exxon's and Shell's, a lot of big employers, right? Let's get LSU and Southern. Let's get East Baton Rouge school system together. That's a big entity. Pennington is a big stalwart. The hospitals, we have a lot of hospitals here. Let's get this here. I think if you get 25 to 30, maybe even 40, you get the governor's office or maybe someone to talk about the state government being downtown. You get about 25, 30, again, maybe 40 of these people to sit down and say, hey, bring in this room, show up with your top 10 requests. If money was not a problem, what would they be? Break them down the lineup. Let's put them up on the wall and let's have a working shop. Egos aside, right? Let's council members, mayor, everybody, egos aside. Let's figure out what are we all going to talk about with one voice. And then you go in and try to educate North Baton Rouge and learn from them as well. Not just teach them, but learn from them. Why is it so hard to get out of poverty in some of those communities? The foundation's doing this opportunity project. Hey, maybe it's because the street lights aren't there. Simple thing. Maybe it's because they're not even going to class, right? How do we go and address truths? Let's go figure out. And then I would say after that, you come back to South Baton Rouge and say, hey, look, we've done this. We've done all your homework for you. Let's make this simple. Here's the 5 things. You guys all have your own charities and they're all great, you know? But if we're going to really move the needle, I need everyone to row in the same fashion. And I would, man, if I had the wealth, I'd even call them out and say, hey, look, I'm giving 5% of my net worth or 10% of my net worth to address these 5 things. You know, who else is with me? Everybody else has if that 5%, maybe $500 or maybe $5 million. But if everybody committed to that and put that the treasure into a pot, we can really do some awesome stuff, man. So that's been in the back of my head of like, how do we get that done? Who's the nucleus? Who's the core? Is it me? I don't know. Is it the mayor, president? Maybe is it a governor? I don't know. But what we're doing isn't working. I mean, we're more and more divided. Some folks are spending so much money over here, some on these nonprofits and forgetting about this. Some folks are worried about, truancy so much that they forget that law enforcement is also something. That's policing your way out of something is not going to fix this issue. What about the judges? Judges, you see all these stories about these kids getting out on bond on a consistent basis 2 or 3 times. That's again, public safety is sort of what I've been, but it could be around the whole thing, like infrastructure. How are we advancing that? So how do I get everybody in the room to kind of help create this grand vision? And I'm not looking for a 15-year strategic plan. I'm 45. I'm just looking for, hey, what's the next 1, 3, and 5 years? What's that look like? You know?
I like it.
Yeah, poke holes in that. Poke holes in that. I mean, look, I don't know the answers to everything, right?
No, but I think it sparks a conversation, which it should.
Yeah.
Let's find out the whys and then get to some sort of root cause, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're out of time here today.
Okay.
But before we get you out of here, we have a set list of questions we ask everyone.
Okay.
First one is, what is something you did as a kid you wish you could still do today?
Ride a bike. I can, but I don't.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah.
Someone said they wish they could still jump off of their parents' house into their pool. So, riding a bike works.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are 3 lessons you've learned along the way?
Be kind to everyone you meet. Plain and simple. Be honest to everyone to everyone you work with. Be kind to everyone you meet. You'd be surprised how small this world is and how round this world is. And I don't know if this is a lesson or if it's something I just do. I'm very OCD, and so I'm to a fault very organized, and so just continuously, that's sort of organization. Stay on top of that.
I love it. What is something you love about Baton Rouge?
LSU football. Yeah,
absolutely,
man. Those 7 days we have a home game, then you add on Christmas and St. Patty's Day and there's 10 weekends a year that I am free and loose, and I just love this city. It's not like I don't love the rest of the time, but those 10 weekends are the most magical weekends for me in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I mean they're truly just a spectacle to be seen.
Yeah.
So for the final question, what can I do to help you?
Oh, okay. Let's get 1,000 views on this.
Let's do it. We'll do what we can.
Okay.
I'll share, you share, we all share, right?
Yeah, there you go.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much for coming in today. I appreciate
thank you,
your
man.
time.
Yeah. I'm wishing you all the best, man. This is a cool thing. This is really cool.
We're doing what I can, trying to figure out a way to how to tell stories, open conversations, and connect folks and make things happen. Kind of like you, trying to take a page out of your book, man.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity, man. Thanks so much.
Man.
Have a good one.
Thank you for coming on the show, and thank you everybody else for tuning in. We'll see y'all back here next week for the latest episode of the Patty G Show. See y'all.